This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with bite.
Doom! The world is falling apart at the seams! Women most affected! News at 11. Everyone is impacted by environmental change. Everyone has to have food, water, and shelter. Everyone needs to at least be in an environment where the temperature isn't going to cause hypothermia or heat sickness. Nobody can live underwater, survive by drinking polluted water, or thrive on food grown in land that poisons it with pollutants. Man, woman, or child, these things have the same impact. You either protect your environment or you lose that which is keeping you alive. And feminists portray environmental issues as though, yep, you guessed it, women are most affected. Why? Because in third world countries, women manage resources like food and water, and women work in agriculture. It could be reasonably argued that under those circumstances, the women would be the first to notice the impact of environmental pollution and changes in weather patterns on those resources. Not because they're more heavily impacted, but because, of course, the people working with those resources would notice. It could be reasonably argued that in those countries, women might be the first to sound the alarm when there are problems affecting these resources. It cannot, however, be reasonably argued that men or children are less in need of safe food and safe water to consume, less impacted, therefore, by shortages. It isn't reasonable to treat them as less in need of consideration when first world countries step in to help provide resources where environmental pollution has made them unavailable or unusable in third world countries. Feminists argue both of those things the same as they do with everything else by arguing that women are more affected while ignoring the experiences of men. In doing so, they impact initiatives intended to counter the impact of environmental damage on the ability of third world populations to survive. They promote unequal distribution based on the belief that sex dictates need, and leave men and families out of initiatives to which they need access just as badly as women do. They leave men to fend for themselves, while demonizing men as if they are the sole root of the problem. But are they? To answer that, we must highlight another thing feminists do. They ignore the consequences of women's choices. While groups like the organizers of the Women's March and the Wiki Project feminism writers assert that environmental change hits women harder, they never look into women's impact on the environment. For women's part, most never consider the pathway taken by products they buy, take home, use, and discard, from concept to consumption. Most of them have no idea. In her report, Chemical Exposures, The Ugly Side of Beauty Products, published in the January 2005 issue of Environmental Health Perspectives, Julia R. Barrett said, "In recent decades, reproductive and developmental problems have become more prevalent. For example, data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention show that male reproductive problems, including undescended testicles and hypospadias, doubled between 1970 and 1993. Environmental chemicals are strongly suspected to be contributing factors." She explains that, according to reports from that and 2 other studies, makeup, shampoo, skin lotion, nail polish, and other personal care products contain chemical ingredients that lack safety data. Moreover, some of these chemicals have been linked in animal studies to male genital birth defects, decreased sperm counts, and altered pregnancy outcomes. Later, she states, a population study conducted by the CDC and published in the March 2004 issue of Environmental Health Perspectives demonstrated that 97% of 2,540 individuals tested had been exposed to one or more phthalates. Another preliminary study conducted at the Harvard School of Public Health and published in the July 2003 issue of EHP showed a correlation between urinary phthalate metabolite concentrations and DNA damage in human sperm. Her report states that exposure sources are unknown, but also states that phthalates are common components of various cosmetics and personal care products. A Huffington Post article titled "Your Fave Makeup Could Be Harming the Environment" by Emily Lyons pointed out that several ingredients commonly found in makeup and women's hygiene products are known to have environmental impact. Titanium dioxide, found in skin tints, mineral-based makeups, and a wide range of other cosmetic products like sunscreens, ends up in groundwater where it causes DNA damage to freshwater snails and stops phytoplankton, which produces about 2/3 of the Earth's atmospheric oxygen, from growing. The article goes on to point out evidence linking antimicrobial chemicals in makeup and other skincare products to damage to coral and shortening lifespans of freshwater organisms. The writer goes on to recommend organic brands of makeup, but even these come with drawbacks. All of these products are sold in containers made of plastic, glass, and sometimes metal that ultimately end up in whatever landfill is local to the buyer's area, along with the unused portions of the product that get thrown out by women eager to get the next new color, style, or treatment. That doesn't even get into the use of fibroblasts from pilfered infant foreskins to make anti-wrinkle creams and hair tonics. Women most affected? Hell no. Only boys' foreskins are harvested for such purposes. If it were girls' skin, everyone would be able to admit that this is child exploitation for the purpose of catering to individual vanity. When will the Women's March incorporate outrage over that into their manifesto? Or do they not consider the widely experienced health issues associated with loss of this important functional tissue worthy of their attention? But is makeup women's only impact on the environment? Surely that's no comparison to that of the oil industry, right? Well, maybe not. But the fashion industry? That's another story. According to Liz Claudio's report, Waste Couture, Environmental Impact of the Clothing Industry, published in the September 2007 issue of Environmental Health Perspectives, women in the West tend to buy much more clothing and discard it more often than men. And this gap in consumer behavior has led to a phenomenon in women's clothing called fast fashion. Fast fashion refers to clothing produced so quickly and so cheaply that many consumers consider it to be disposable. Claudio writes, "Fast fashion provides the marketplace with affordable apparel aimed mostly at young women. Fueling the demand are fashion magazines that help create the desire for new must-haves for each season." In the next paragraph, she points out that this fashion cycle leaves a pollution footprint with each step of the clothing life cycle, generating potential environmental and occupational hazards. One would think the rise of thrift shopping in the last few decades would alleviate some of this problem, but according to Claudio, only about 1/5 of the clothing donated to charities is directly used or sold in their thrift shops. She quotes Pietra Rivoli, a professor of international business at the McDonough School of Business in Georgetown University, as saying, "There are nowhere near enough people in America to absorb the mountains of cast-offs, even if they were given away." Charities like the Salvation Army help to fund their programs by selling old clothing to textile recyclers to be turned into industrial wiping rags, filling for upholsteries, or paper. Many people simply discard rather than donating their old clothing anywhere. The report points out that according to the EPA Office of Solid Waste, Americans throw away more than 68 pounds of clothing and textiles per person per year, and clothing and other textiles represent about 4% of municipal solid waste. Claudio describes the energy-intensive production of man-made fibers, which relies on fossil fuels and releases pollutants into the air and in wastewater put out by textile plants. Cotton, which she says is one of the most popular and versatile fibers used in clothing manufacture, is so reliant on pesticides that it accounts for 1/4 of all of those used in the U.S., resulting in significant environmental contamination. The World Resources Institute's July 5, 2017 article, "The Apparel Industry's Environmental Impact in 6 Graphics," by Deborah Drew and Genevieve Yaumi, points out that it takes as much water to produce one cotton shirt as a person would drink in 2.5 years. In Central Asia, the article states the Aral Sea has nearly disappeared because cotton farmers drew excessively from the Amu Darya and the Sir Darya rivers. The article goes on to state, water use and pollution also take place during clothing production. About 20% of industrial water pollution is due to garment manufacturing, while the world uses 5 trillion liters 1.3 trillion gallons of water each year for fabric dyeing alone, enough to fill 2 million Olympic-sized swimming pools. The U.S., by the way, is the largest exporter of cotton in the world. It's grown here, then sent to other countries to go through the most polluting parts of its process of becoming clothing. What a coincidence. We're the largest exporter of crybaby first world feminist ideology in the world, too. And what do they do about the problem? They buy skeins of pink-dyed cotton, wool, or synthetic yarn and knit pussy hats to throw massive temper tantrums about the U.S. federal government not forcing their employers to pay for another pollutant, hormonal birth control. In his article, Water Pollution Caused by Birth Control Poses Dilemma, published May 23, 2012 by Live Science News, Wynne Perry writes of the pill's active ingredient, "Not only is ethinyl estradiol quite potent, creating intersex fish and amphibians, but it is very difficult to remove from wastewater, which carries it into natural waterways." On March 4, 2016, in an article titled "Estrogen in Birth Control Pills Has a Negative Impact on Fish," Science Daily reported on research by Lena Nicolaris, which found that when chemicals from hormonal birth control pollute waterways, they actually alter the genes of fish living in them. But the environmental impact of this convenience for women may not be limited to wildlife. A 2007 study published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism found that testosterone levels in men have rapidly declined during the past 2 decades. The report, "A Population-Level Decline in Serum Testosterone Levels in American Men" by Thomas G. Travison, Andre B. Araujo, Amy B. O'Donnell, Varant Kuplian, and John B. McKinley, stated that the change does not appear to be attributable to observable changes and explanatory factors, including health and lifestyle characteristics such as smoking and obesity. The report also said the estimated population-level declines are greater in magnitude than the cross-sectional declines in testosterone typically associated with age, and went on to conclude that these results indicate that recent years have seen a substantial and as yet unrecognized age-independent population-level decrease in testosterone in American men, potentially attributable to birth cohort defects or to health or environmental effects not captured in observable data. If estrogen in groundwater is affecting fish and amphibians on a genetic level, what are the effects of estrogen in drinking water? Scientific American's article, "Can Birth Control Hormones Be Filtered from the Water Supply?" reported that trace amounts of birth control and other medications have been found in many urban and suburban water supplies around the country, and that while some do not believe this is a problem, researchers have found evidence that even extremely diluted concentrations of drug residues harm fish, frogs, and other aquatic species, and have been shown in labs to impair human cell function. I could go on. I could describe the environmental impact of mining for the components of many women's favorite self-decorations, jewelry. I could describe the environmental impact of the cleaning chemicals women use, the environmental impact of the production, distribution, use, and eventual disposal of many modern conveniences and luxuries used by Western women, even those in the lower income ranges, all of which exist because of a female-driven Western consumer economy. But that's not what this is about. This is not to say that striving for technological advancement for convenience sake is wrong, or that grooming, self-care, or even the use of birth control are wrong. The question comes up only because of the treatment of environmental issues as a female victim narrative. Readily available evidence suggests that while environmentalism is not necessarily the women's issue the Pussyhat Brigade makes it out to be, it is one, in at least one way. Women, at least first world women, have significant power to impact the environment in both good ways and bad. And yes, that would include the very women who have been marching in protest against being denied outside facilitation for obtaining personal conveniences that are shown to negatively impact the environment. Women who whine about being expected to dress professionally at work, then turn around and feed the fast fashion and makeup industries that are destroying the world's water supply and adding unnecessarily to our landfills, and then complain that women in third world countries are adversely affected without admitting to being responsible for a significant portion of the problem. What kind of hat are these women going to wear to march in protest of their own behavior? I know one I could suggest. Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 30, Women Most Affected, Climate of the Accountability Gap. I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with that adorable specter of death, Prim Reaper, and Woozle Slayer, Karen Strawn, to drag the truth out of another sneaky Women's March lie. But before we get into today's topic, a couple of reminders. If you want to join in the chat on YouTube, please go to the Badger Live Streams channel. If YouTube is experiencing platform malfunction syndrome and it won't let you listen, we're also on Twitch and we're also on Facebook because you can't keep a good badger down. And if you want to be sure you'll always catch our live streams, even if YouTube decides to throw us in the gulag for wrongthink, or if you want to catch our show in its audio format, remember to go to badgerfeed.com and register to receive notifications so you'll always know when we're producing more content. Also, we are still raising funds to get our witnesses back to the courtroom for one more round against our opponent's fancy schmancy New York lawyer. If you want to help us with that, you can donate at feedthebadger.com. Regarding today's topic, this discussion is not about the validity or discrediting of popular theories on climate change in general. It's an examination of feminism's women worsting in the context of environmental issues and female accountability. And holy hell, they actually personified Mike's cartoon about the meteor destroying the planet. I guess I was going to show some of that, and I don't have it. I thought I did. No, I have something else that I'm not going to try to do. So, back to the intro. According to their official talking point, environmental justice. We believe that every person and every community in our nation has the right to clean water, clean air, and access to and enjoyment of public lands. I love that last bit, right? Enjoyment. You have the right to enjoy things. We believe that our environment and our climate must be protected and that our land and natural resources cannot be exploited for corporate greed or gain or greed, especially at the risk of public safety and health. So now it's you against the corporations, guys. It has nothing to do with all those things women buy. Feminists have become adept at feigning concern for all while reserving actual legal and policy considerations strictly for their narrative on women's welfare. This is a prime example of that issue. The talking point itself sounds gender neutral and might be considered so were it not put forth by the feminist movement, which fights to gender initiatives intended to reduce the impact of environmental pollution on various populations. Feminist organizations portray women as the primary victims of resource shortages in order to secure the lion's share or even the entirety of said resources under women's control or under the control of feminist organizations, while reserving blame for the creation of those shortages strictly for men. Closer examination often reveals that the issue is being evaluated backward. For instance, groups examining water shortages in areas where women bear primary responsibility for supplying their homes and communities with it see women as the primary victims of those shortages, but never take into consideration the fact that in areas where men bear that responsibility, they have created more efficient and effective systems for gathering, sanitizing, and distributing it. While there are initiatives in place now that bring those skills and technologies to women in third world countries, this brings the question up of whether women are actually victims in this situation, or whether this situation demonstrates a gender difference in approaches to solving problems related to meeting community supply needs. Is it merely that women have it worse, or could it be that men do it better?
Oh, if you want to go first, Karen, that's cool.
Well, I just wanted to thank you, Hannah, for bringing up the whole issue with phthalates and male sexual development. I think that actually has it's one of the reasons I actually like John Kerry. There was a congressional committee that was gathered to determine whether petrochemicals were damaging the population particularly in terms of sexual development, and he spoke quite vociferously to the petrochemical companies in terms of Kind of like speaking to the tobacco industry, like, okay, so all your studies say it's fine, but, you know, why should we believe you? So essentially, like, I think that this is a multifaceted problem. And yes, a lot of it has to do with consumer culture. It has to do with the engineered obsolescence that's built into things. And a lot of that, at least 50%, probably more of that, is actually driven by women, because women are much more concerned about fashion than men are. If you look at the design, the basic design of a business suit, it hasn't really changed much for men since the late 1800s. It's pretty much the same deal. There's a little bit of difference in the wideness of the lapel and the wideness of the tie, and whether the shirt has cufflinks or buttons on the cuffs. But other than that, it's pretty much the same deal. And women drive so much of this sort of rampant consumerism. I was actually watching a show called Till Debt Do Us Part, and it was hosted by a financial advisor called Gail Voss Oxlade. And she would go in and get couples who were like on the verge of divorce because their finances were so absolutely in tatters, that was what was causing a potential family breakup. And she would put them on the straight and narrow financially. And there was this one couple where the woman, she had something like 150 dresses for her daughter that never had the tags removed. They're hanging in the closet. They never had the tags removed. They never came out of their packaging. The kid's already outgrown them by, it's a baby, right? So by 6 months or a year, will never fit in them, and never wore them. But I just saw them, and I just saw it, and I just had to buy it. Like, it was just so adorable. I had to buy it. And when you look at that kind of, and I think that there's a disconnect in terms of women and the process of production. Because even women who are in the workforce are sort of divorced from the process of production, of actual production. So production in terms of extracting minerals from the earth or oil, production in terms of shipping that to a factory and putting it together into a product and then shipping it to a store, right? They're divorced from all of that. They're in managerial positions. They're in clerical work. They're in administrative positions and things like that. And they're organizing stuff, but they don't perform that hands-on work. And so I think that they don't quite realize what goes into, in terms of the cost to the planet, the cost to men's bodies, even those costs that go into the production of whatever it is that they're going to buy. So they don't invest that any real value in it. So it really is easy to buy a dress, wear it once, throw it away, because it's out of fashion 3 months later. So I mean, it's a very tricky problem, and I think that women absolutely refuse to take ownership of their part in things. And I think that they don't acknowledge that they're largely the ones driving the consumer culture. In terms of personal items, 75 to 80% of all of the money spent on personal items, that includes clothing and jewelry and cosmetics and other things like that, that can be obviously gendered, right? No matter who's spending the money, that money is spent on women. So women really need to take a look at how they're contributing to the problem that they are now complaining about and blaming on men. They're blaming it on the men who throw pipe in 40 below weather in northern Alberta, because petrochemicals damage the planet. But they're not looking at that plastic water bottle that they have to buy a new one every time instead of refilling it. So
I'm so glad that you went first now, because that kind of really ties perfectly into what I was going to say. I've been doing a fair bit of reading on this topic today, and in my readings, I've been noticing one main theme. The authors of a lot of these papers believe that it is a feminist issue to promote environmental justice. And a brief look at what this means is that they will argue that environmental degradation and pollution results in reduced quality of life. And it's not even that a lot of them jump to saying anything as obvious as, and this reduced quality of life primarily affects women. No, instead, they seem to be implying that unchecked capitalism and or materialism is what's responsible for poor environmental conditions. And who is primarily responsible for unchecked capitalism and materialism? Men, of course. So as good environmental feminists, these heroic women need to get this stuff under control so that everyone can go back to living in harmony with the earth.
Well, you know, and I just like, I absolutely find that, because I am not your typical woman, right? Like I find a tank top that I like, right? I found a tank top that I liked at Mark's Work Warehouse. It was good price, good fit, all of that. Bought it until they changed it. They changed not just the colors, but the fit, right? And I would buy, I don't know, like 12 of them every year and wear them until they were falling apart, and then go buy 12 more. And, you know, so, I mean, like, essentially, I'm, you know, and I didn't care about seasonal colors. I didn't care about that. I just cared that it fit, right? And then they changed the fit. They changed the style of it. I ended up having to go somewhere else. I found another tank top. I bought, you know, 12 in different colors, right? And I'm wearing them for the next year or two. You know, that's how I do things. I'm wearing a pair of jeans that's about like 6 years old now and has a hole in the crotch, because they're, you know, like I don't care. I don't care about fashion. I really don't. But I do see women who do care about fashion. I see them in the stores all the time. And there's a reason why when I go in to buy clothes for myself, I can almost always find like this massive, huge clearance rack of stuff that was regular price 3 weeks ago. Now they're just trying to get rid of it, because if they don't, they'll actually just throw it away. Because, hey, you know, the next new thing is up. When I go in to buy clothes for my sons, you don't see that. You don't ever see those big, massive clearance racks full of clothes in the men's apparel section, because the fashions don't change that fast, right? So essentially, if this hoodie, if a guy was going to buy this hoodie 6 months ago, he'll buy it at full price today too, right? And so, because things just don't change that quickly for guys. And it's the same with body care products and stuff like that. Like my boys, they use like a shampoo body wash combination for the entire shebang, right? That's what they use. Like one bottle of product is what they use in the shower for everything, including their hair. And women will use 800 different kinds of things on their, you know, and then they need the lotion, and then they need different lotion for their body and their face. Who puts hand cream on their face? What are they, savages?
Oh
right?
my God.
And I'm just like, really, this is where we're at right now. Like this level of consumerism. And I think half the complaints about the pink tax is because they just buy more of this shit than men do, right? Like they buy tons more, even in terms of just quantity and the number of products than men do. And then they complain that, you know, the products are more expensive. Well, you know, you're the ones buying it. Like, just don't buy it. Like, you have that choice to not buy this shit, right? But women do not want to look at their habits. They don't want to look at the fact that, oh yeah, no, the drapes are out of fashion. My boyfriend's aunt, sorry, is completely redoing her kitchen because it's been 5 years.
Oh, goodness.
It's been
Jeez.
5 whole years.
The last time my mom redid her kitchen was because our house got struck by lightning and fried all of the appliances.
There you
Wow.
go. There you go. And I'm sitting here with my kitchen. It needs redoing because it hasn't been redone since 1989. And some of it hasn't been changed out since 1952 when the house was built. Right, so the light fixtures are from 1952, and the cabinets are from 1952. The countertops are from 1989, right? And the linoleum is from 1952. So we're looking at, yeah, we have a justification to redo the kitchen, but you know, the fact that, and it's not just redoing, she's not just redoing the kitchen in terms of appliances. She wants new backsplashes. So new glass tile backsplashes and new flooring and, you know, new paint and new cupboards and everything, right? And all new appliances. And I'm thinking, like, I hope you're taking all of this shit to the restore, to the Habitat for Humanity restore to resell it, because, like, what a waste. What an egregious waste. But she wants to stay up to date. She wants to stay current. And, you know, she invites people over for coffee, and, you know, the neighbors are judging her on how up to date her curtains are, and her swags, and, you know, the artwork on her walls, and all. Like, does anybody actually think, when you go to Walmart and you see all these kind of like baskets and bins, you know, these decorative bins and baskets and bamboo trays and then you know, artwork for your walls and mirrors and lamps and shit, does anybody think that men are buying these things?
Not very many. You know, that is an area, this reason that I brought up all of this about the consumerism. And it's not necessarily to condemn consuming and all that, because everybody consumes different things. But feminists have this big complaint, right, about all this stuff affects the environment, and all of this stuff going into the trash affects the environment. And there are legitimate complaints, like the stuff with the makeup. That is a legitimate complaint. The fact that there's a big mass of plastic trash. There's an island of massive island of plastic trash in, I believe, the Pacific Ocean, which is just unbelievable, just absolutely unbelievable. And, you know, I mean, we do have a problem in the world with pollution, regardless of where you fall in the climate change discussion. That does happen. When my parents were growing up, and I think for even part of my childhood, there were parts of the Ohio River that were on fire at various times because of the pollutants being dumped in the river. And then there would be, you know, lightning would strike something, or some other thing would spark, and then the pollutants would burn off. There were just different things like that happening. So this isn't something that is not a problem. And it's not something that affects only women, but it is something over which women have a significant amount of power. Women do have the capability of changing this. We can make our own decisions with regards to, like, I have clothes, guys, that matter to me a lot, not because they're in fashion, not because I like the color or the cut or I think I look pretty in them, but because my grandmother wore them. Mm-hmm. My grandmother made some of them. And, like, those are important to me. When I go out and I buy a t-shirt or something, I buy it because I really like it. And I will wear it until, I think it's been a while since I've told this story about this shirt. I have a shirt that a t-shirt that I got from the owner of a bar in the town where I grew up. That was one of the first places that my brother and his band regularly played out. And I have had that t-shirt now for like over 20 years. And it's not a t-shirt anymore. It's
You're going robotic.
Am I going robo on you guys?
Oh, there we go. Okay, go ahead.
So it's not a t-shirt really anymore. The sleeves are torn off. The neck is torn off. It's got holes throughout the entire thing, and I still wear it occasionally with something underneath it so that, you can't see through it. It's falling apart, and I still wear the shirt, and I will not throw out the shirt. I know a lot of guys.
I have one of those too.
Yeah, I know a lot of
Open
guys
your
who
mouth.
have the shirt, right? A lot of guys have that shirt, not that particular one, and their girlfriends are constantly nagging them to throw it out. Well, now you have an answer when your girlfriend nags you to throw out that shirt.
Now you can just call yourself punk.
Well, you're helping the environment by not throwing out your 65 pounds of clothing annually that she's probably making up for by doubling it.
Yeah.
Well, for any punk, Edmonton punk aficionados from like back when I was a kid, like I still have my shirt, my Open Your Mouth and Say SNFU shirt that I've worn in videos before, that I got when I was 16 years old. I still have that. And I still wear it. So it's, like honestly but the entire thing too is like, you look at how all of this impacts the environment and all of that. And then you have to look too at how taking gently used clothing from the West and dumping it on the market in third world countries affects the ability of clothing makers in those countries to actually sell the clothes that they make, right? Like, how does it affect their local economy when you are essentially dumping these huge containers, shipping containers full of clothes for almost no money, right, onto the market and squeezing out a portion of their economy?
And how does it contribute to the tendency of a lot of these like the third world manufacturers end up selling clothes for almost nothing on the first world market and using labor that, people here would be appalled at the hours they work, the conditions they work under, and the amount they get paid for their labor. Mm-hmm. It's practically slave labor. And
and it's like when you go back like 100 or 150 years and you maybe could not buy off the rack clothes, like any clothing that you would buy, even if it was pre-made, it would have to be fitted and tailored and altered for you, right? So there was a fair amount of custom work that went into getting clothing yourself, right? And you might have 3 outfits. You'd have a Sunday church outfit. You would have a outfit for work, for working in, and you would have an outfit for something in the middle, right? And that was it. That was what you had. You had 3 sets of clothes. And so, I mean, even my mother, right? Even my mother, when she got home from school, would change out of her school clothes and into her play clothes. And the play clothes were generally pretty ratty. The school clothes were something that was more presentable, right? And then she had a set of good clothes to wear to church. And that was what she had when she was a kid. And now when I look at, and this is, during a time when laundry was, you didn't just throw it in your front load washing machine and then transfer it into the dryer and then it was done and it didn't need any more work. I mean, these were times when you boiled certain things that you had to wash, like diapers, handkerchiefs, underwear, things like that. You boiled them on the stove in a big pot. You ran everything else through a wash bucket and a laundry mangle and then hung it to dry and then ironed it and all of that, right? So laundry was a lot of work. So you were doing laundry constantly because your kids and your husband only had 3 sets of clothes each. And that was how you lived, was constantly doing laundry. And the reason is because clothing was so expensive, right? Because it couldn't be mass produced in the way that it is today so cheaply, because we didn't have access to what is essentially what we would consider to be essentially slave labor in other countries.
Yeah, and then of course you have the other end of this, where the fact that it's become easier to provide care for your clothes, the fact that it has become easier to throw things out instead of keeping them for years and years, seems to have led to this. The fast fashion thing that I read about, that really kind of blew my mind, because it's not really something it's not how my family lived. And so when I was growing up, and so it's never been how I've done things. And even my kids really weren't, growing up and in school and everything, weren't into anything that would translate into that. So it was when I started reading about, women buying clothes and wearing them once and throwing them out and everything, I'm sitting here thinking, how do you earn enough money to pay for all of that? I hadn't even thought about it. But I'm sure the credit card industry probably has a lot to do with that. The ability to spend money you don't have and not think about the fact that you spent money that you don't have until you hit bankruptcy probably has quite a bit to do with it. But
it's not even just the throwaway clothes that you're talking about. It's that, like, clothes that even you're meant to rewear at least a couple of times have become actively crappier too. Like,
but I mean,
I go out and try and buy a shirt, and it's practically see-through, and it's like, okay, if I just wanted to go out in my underwear, then I would
just go out in your underwear.
Thank you very much. I wouldn't spend $40 for the privilege and have to buy a second shirt in order to feel like I'm being decent in public.
Right,
It's kind of absurd, yeah.
And I'm seeing people throw away things like, all right, I've had the same coat for years, the same overcoat that you wear outside in the cold weather and everything. It's the same coat that I accidentally left behind at the Calgary Expo when we got thrown out, for those that remember. But I've had that coat. I had that coat for years before the Calgary Expo, and I still have it now. And there are several areas on the inside of the coat that have my stitching in them, because I don't want to throw away that coat because it has huge pockets. And it's hard to find a coat with you. For me, that pretty much sums it up. Clothing is functional first, and then the way it looks is okay too. That's important, but it's not the most important thing. And you could find me 400 coats that I might like, but if the pockets didn't have that same size to them, or they didn't have a lot of pockets, I'd be like, no, I'm not really interested. I'll just sew up this seam that has split, and I'll sew the bottom of the pockets again just to make sure they don't blow out again, it tells you I use the pockets, and I'll keep wearing that coat. And I've done that pretty much forever. That's just, I don't go from coat to coat to coat. Most of my clothes are hand-me-downs because I don't have to buy things, because everybody around me goes from, oh, it's been a couple of years, I got to get another coat. Oh, my jeans have a hole in the knee, got to get new jeans. Well, those could be denim shorts, but
yeah, for sure.
And that's just the way it is.
You want to hear something crazy? You guys want to hear something crazy?
Sure.
Okay.
I know how to darn socks.
Oh,
my mother taught me. My mother taught me how to darn socks. We would take a light bulb, an old burnt out light bulb, okay, and you stick it in the sock, and you use a needle and yarn, and you weave new fabric across the hole in the sock to make it wearable again.
Yep.
You make it sound so sexy.
Well, and that's cheating, though, because people didn't used to have light bulbs.
Well, they would use an egg. They would
use an egg.
Oh, wow.
Or a ball, anything, right? But they, I literally knew how to darn socks, because in my family, when my mother was a stay-at-home mom, before she went back to work when I was 10 and didn't have the time to do this stuff anymore, and we had more disposable income, so we could afford to just buy new socks. But essentially, she taught me how to fold diapers when I was a kid, because we looked after, she babysat, and one of the kids she babysat was still in diapers, and so she taught me how to fold diapers and how to pin them without pinning them to the child, and things like that, right? So she taught me how to make plastic pants to go over the diapers, right? She taught me how to sew.
Yep. Yep.
She taught me all of this, like she sewed our clothes until we were in junior high school. And at that point, we would have been laughed at for wearing homemade clothes.
Oh gosh, I wore homemade clothes right on into college, but that was partly because my mom had the skill of a professional seamstress, and so
did my mom. But at the same time, you could sort of tell because there was no brand name on it.
Yeah, I guess where I went to high school might have been different because I went to school in a farming community. So I went to school with a girl who had this prom dress, right, that looked like it came out of Gone with the Wind, that she made herself. She won prizes at the county fair with it in 4-H, and of course she made it so that she could take pieces off of it and use it later as a wedding dress as long as it still fit when she got married someday.
Oh, nice.
So I guess it just depends. I think
probably
there's a difference in how urban women do this type of thing and how rural women do this type of thing as well.
My mom made my grade 9 leaving ceremony dress.
Yeah, what's a leaving ceremony?
My sister made my graduation dress for grade 12.
So is a leaving ceremony like when you move out of the house, or
leaving junior high and going?
Okay.
Like prom or something.
Yeah. They've started calling those all graduations here. Like we have, believe it or not, here in the U.S. in some places we have kindergarten graduation now. It's kind of like a participation trophy. But I want to get into
really is, but
I think we've kind of killed this aspect of it.
For something like that, you wouldn't have been laughed at. But for something like jeans,
no,
you would have been laughed at.
Mom didn't do homemade jeans because
to take turns.
Yeah, my mom didn't do homemade jeans because it didn't save us any money. And it's the quality of certain brand names that were affordable was good enough that she was satisfied with it. So she would do other things. She homemade, things that were important, or things that, like, it was hard to find good quality shirts for children, and even for men. My dad, most of my dad's clothes were made by my mom, just stuff like that. But the problem with the cheapness is in part the quality, and the problem with it is in part the fact that stuff gets thrown away and everything. But I do kind of want to bring up the other aspect of this, like the women worsting on this. Not only are women not primarily affected by this, women in third world countries might be the first people to notice it because they work with these environmental resources, but that brings up the question. Here we have countries, all the Western countries, men are responsible for securing resources for their communities. Men are the ones who ensure that we have water, that our sewage is taken care of, that we have electricity, that we have gas heat and all that. Men are the ones who do all of those jobs. And because men are the ones who do all of those jobs, engineering has been applied. And so, due to that engineering, those resources are more readily available, and it takes less manual labor in a lot of cases to get the same amount to the public, or with less manual labor, a greater amount can be distributed to the public. And so I kind of want to revisit that question. Is it merely that women have it worse, or could it be that men do it better? And it really, to me, it does bring up a difference in how men and women handle things. Women will continue to carry a bucket of water on their head back and forth to the village over and over again every day for centuries, while men try to figure out an easier way to get that water to the village, get it cleaned, and get it to people's houses.
Well, agreed. Like half the time the women who are complaining about this are thinking, oh, well, that method just causes more pollution that way. Like when I was doing a bunch of reading on this earlier, like they were basically just talking about how I don't know. There was one article that was like, in any discussion of feminism in the environment, it is critical to avoid the intimation that women have any special connection to the earth. But then they concluded their discussion with, feminists, with our understanding of oppressions based on power discrepancies stemming from differences in race, class, and gender, are inclined to notice linkages of race, class, and gender and the physical environment. To use the power of science, quote unquote, to rectify environmental injustice is a feminist endeavor. So essentially, like, it kind of boils down to a, hey, let's not make a bunch of sexist overgeneralizations, but insert bunch of sexist overgeneralizations here. So, like, despite claiming to believe otherwise, these guys seem to believe that women have some kind of higher ability to help the environment than men do, despite studies demonstrating the contrary. Like, they think that men are actively contributing to, like, damaging the environment more than women are, even though, as we've kind of talked about it, that's really not often the case.
Well, I think too, you know, like, men are looking for the easiest way to supply the most product, right? They're looking for efficiency, and they're like, because efficiency reflects competence, and that competence is how men prove themselves, right? And so yes, I think that, you know, I think that there is a tendency in amongst, you know, corporations, and maybe even in the male way of doing things, or the more masculine way of doing things, to cut corners, right, in order to maximize efficiency and therefore maximize competence, for sure, right? But at the same time, like Hannah said, you know, if men don't want to waste 3 hours a day carrying a bucket of water on their head back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that these women, right, who are doing this often for 3 hours a day, because it's not just one trip, right, to the water source. It's multiple trips. The fact that they're doing that for 3 hours a day, sometimes more, or they send their daughters to do it. Like, you know, like, wouldn't an aqueduct be better? You know, you could, like, have a pump station, even a manual pump station. You could just have, like, some dude out in a shack, pay him in whatever currency you have, right, sitting right next to a pump to, like, constantly be, you know, or, like, have a donkey walking around a wheel pumping water, right? Oh, and
Hey, a man for...
He's got a feed bag. He's got a feed bag on his nose, and, you know, and you give him a break every couple hours and to drink water, and he just pumps water from the water source to the village. Wouldn't that be great?
But pay a man for water, though. What kind of patriarchal system are you trying to set up here?
Capitalism! Oh, God!
Oh,
no! What have I done? Oy!
Oh, darn it.
We're in trouble now. You know, and there are initiatives that are working towards, you know, they gather the women that are responsible for gathering those resources, and they teach them more modern information. They're starting to teach them, you know, how to create and run some of these systems and everything, and it's kind of neat to see that happening. They're not necessarily all feminist led, but there is feminism involved in some of those, and it's actually, like, one of the few things I'm looking at and going, you know, if feminists did stuff like this all the time, and that was what feminism was all about, I'd be like, hey, go feminism. But unfortunately,
but, you know, all they're really doing is freeing up those women to spend 3 hours a day extra nagging their husbands, so.
And putting on the makeup that they don't buy yet, because
they're not,
you know. But here's the thing: it's like I said, if that was, you know, feminism's main gig, I'd be all for feminism, and I think that if the movement wanted to redeem itself, they could take a focus on things like that. That's a women in STEM area that's worth doing. And I wouldn't necessarily say that it should be necessarily an all-women initiative, as long as they offer it and say anybody that wants to get involved in this can get involved. You'd probably see it's still going to be mostly women because of the cultures in those areas, but you'd probably see some men and boys getting involved as well.
Well, I mean, like, the problem is, as is often the case with feminist initiatives, is that, like, it's not even that they're not doing things that are actively useful. It's that, like, even in trying to talk about their environmental concerns or whatever it is, they wind up losing sight of what they actually want to talk about by wrapping up the relevant issue in a bunch of nonsense words that don't actually mean anything. Like, for example, the following line in an actual study that I was reading: in recent years, ecofeminism has put greater effort into ethical and political issues. GUARD advocates that in the future, ecofeminism will explore the intersections of ecofeminism and the queer theory, ecofeminism and bioregionalism, and ecofeminism and vegetarian and vegan feminist threads. See, now, like, not only do half of those words not actually mean anything, but the other half of them seem to be nearly, if not entirely, unrelated to the initial issue, which is supposed to be the environment. But they can't just talk about the environment because somehow they have to tie in all of their ridiculous oppression nonsense to justify their involvement. So just, like, look at the very next paragraph in this paper. Common to all ecofeminism forms and variants is the assumption that there is a connection between oppression of women and nature. This is the theme of double oppression, which means that oppression of women is related to non-sustainable exploitation of nature. The grounds for this oppression are the patriarchal society and the power of men. There it is again.
So if men live on Earth and use things, women are oppressed, and being oppressed by nature is totally gay.
I just don't understand how my boyfriend's aunt's new kitchen fits into this.
I don't know
exactly. But what I will say, what I will say is, I love the way that they tried to fit homosexuality into that. Like, if you are dying of thirst and you're gay, do you die faster or more painfully? Like, yeah, see, which is it? Like, I don't understand what that has to do with it.
They're not concerned about, like, real practical issues like the ones that we're talking about. They're just concerned about using these things in any way that they can to perpetuate a victim narrative.
Now, I could get it if they came out and said, you know, I could get it if they came out and said, well, in these societies, people have homophobia, and therefore, when they have limited resources, and they are distributing those in the community, if they think you're gay, they won't share it with you. That would be a way in which limited resources could have an impact. But then, you know, they're not coming out with something like that. They're just mentioning gay in conjunction with it, as if just by virtue of being gay, the person has more suffering in terms of this, without any actual cause or reality behind it.
I'm sorry, but this entire thing that, like, you know, the destruction and the denigration and the devastation of the planet, the rape of the planet, the you know, all of that, turning it into a gender issue where women are not at fault, number one, and where women are harmed the most, number two, is just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, shouldn't we be caring about the salmon? God damn it!
I would hope so, because I think they're delicious.
It's the female salmon that get affected the most.
There you go.
Prim.
Are we gonna start a row over this?
Oh my god!
It's pronounced row.
Oh god,
row.
whatever. Row.
Oh my god, dog! Shut up.
All right, guys. Well, if I think we've kind of gone through all the aspects of the topic that I had set. Does anybody have anything they wanted introduced that we haven't actually gone over?
I do want to actually bring the topic back once again, because this is something that has really bothered me since I saw a documentary out of the CBC, believe it or not, called The Disappearing Male, and it implicates certain petrochemicals, including bisphenol A and phthalates, in interference in healthy male sexual development. A lot of these Chemicals are in, again, personal care products. They get absorbed into your skin, into your system. They can cross the placental barrier. They act as estrogen mimics and also as testosterone disruptors. So some of them mimic estrogen and interfere with male sexual development that way. Some of them simply attach to testosterone receptors in developing male fetuses, but they don't do what testosterone does. They just take up the space on those receptors and don't let go, and then the testosterone doesn't actually work the way it's supposed to. So you're looking at issues with, I think, with declines in testosterone levels and declines in genital size and declines in problems with undescended testicles and things like that, malformed genitals, things like that, of baby boys, right? There is a native reservation just outside of Sarnia, Ontario. Sarnia, Ontario is home to 40% of Canada's chemical industry, and the birth ratio on that reserve that is in the shadow of that and that is downstream from that, concentration of chemical plants, right, is the birth ratio is something like 4 girls to 1 boy, and the miscarriage rate is just absolutely through the roof. So what we're looking at is actually something that seems to be affecting boys more than girls, affecting men more than women in terms of certain petrochemicals and their effects on humans. So essentially, that I don't think has been looked at enough, and I think it really needs to have another congressional or Senate committee looking at it. And some more measures taken other than just getting rid of bisphenol A.
Well, there certainly needs to be
phthalates. And one of the things about phthalates is phthalates make plastics soft. So phthalates are the cornerstone of the safe baby toy industry. They are what makes rubber duckies and squeaky toys and soft plastic baby toys soft
stuff babies
and safe.
Put in their mouth.
Yes.
Pretty much everything
Yes.
babies put in their mouth, but I mean stuff that's intended for babies to put in their mouth.
Yeah. So we essentially have a situation where we may actually be damaging boys right from the moment they're conceived, let alone emerge from the womb, through the use of these products that contain phthalates. And so I think that that's something that really needs to be looked at. And children's hospitals in Canada, anyway, are concerned enough that for their neonatal intensive care units and for very young children, they have sourced IV tubing that doesn't contain phthalates. So it's something that the medical system is concerned enough about, that they're taking measures to avoid exposing very young children to this particular chemical,
which means
or this particular family of chemicals.
Which means it's possible to produce those products without...
something that I think really needs to be looked at a little bit more.
Right, which means it's possible to produce those products without using these chemicals. I imagine it probably increases the price, but quality always increases. It's a rare thing for quality to not increase the price. And at the same time, I suspect most of the time when quality increases the price, it also increases the length of how long it's going to last, the product is going to last. So on one hand, you have this situation where it's better for the public, and on the other hand, you have the situation where the public gets to keep the item longer, and it doesn't need to be produced quite as much. So now, obviously, we have the spectrum of our listeners go from government regulation for everything to government regulation for almost nothing. I think one of the things that is vital with information like this is making the information public, making the availability of the information to the public widespread and easy to access. And with that in mind, you would have most people, especially most people with kids, would turn around and say, well, I don't want products with this in it if it's going to hurt the kids and it's going to hurt the environment around the kids. I certainly don't want products with this in it if it's going to affect me in my old age. I'm going to buy things that are free of this chemical. And that would be how the market could control it. But in the environment that we are in now, it is almost impossible to create that situation in the United States where you have the general public widely aware of something like this. And so you do end up, because of the way our system is, the system itself creates a need for dealing with things with a combination of information availability and regulation, even if the regulations are only going to be temporary until the standard changes. You know, like the industry standard changes. And eventually, if the industry standard ends up changing, we don't really need those regulations other than to decide what has to be disclosed about products that are coming into the country.
Yeah, well, I mean, we did this with chlorofluorocarbons, right? You know, we managed to get CFCs pretty much out of all consumer products, from refrigerators to asthma inhalers. And so, like, and that was a very definite, like, there was a very definite noticeable problem, right? Like, people who had lived all of their lives, you know, all of their childhoods, never getting a sunburn, were suddenly getting sunburns, you know, from very little sun exposure and all of those things, right? And so essentially what you had, and skin cancer rates were going up and all of this. So essentially you had a noticeable problem that was happening in real time that people could pay attention to. And what you had was, you know, something that would just take a one-time effort, right? So it would just take a big effort for sure, right? But a one-time effort by various industries to replace this one thing with something else, right? So it made your asthma inhaler 50 cents more expensive. It made your refrigerator $25 more expensive, right? But it wasn't like a massive, massive lifestyle shift. Once you replaced your refrigerator, right, it was done. And it only cost you $25 more. You know, once the asthma inhaler companies replaced that chemical, it was 50 cents more. It's not that big a hit to your pocket, right? But what we're talking about with just consumerism in general is a massive shift in how we do things. And it's going to take a massive shift in how women do things, because women are the ones who are obsessed with fashion, right? And therefore, it appears to be women who are the ones who actually generate the conditions, the consumer conditions that create engineered obsolescence, at least in terms of decorative stuff, things that are fashionable, things that, you know, you might have guys who want the latest Apple Watch or whatever. I joke that my boyfriend should marry his Apple Watch. He's so in love with it. But, you know, like, when you look at the general market for products and engineered obsolescence, the fashion industry and the cosmetics industry are like some of the biggest culprits out there. And you know, women are going to have to actually take a good hard look at their consumer habits. They really are.
Well, there's another habit that women have that's very different than men that I think partially impacts why women get into that difference in consumerism. Men like to know how the things they are buying work. And it's not necessarily today the same as it used to be, where, you know, most guys know at least the basics on how to fix their cars. Although I think most people should know that anyway. But in any case, there is a degree to which, like, if you see a guy go out to buy something, he most of the time he will understand all of the different features of that product, not just what they do, what they're called, how they work, why this particular type of that feature is better than that particular type of that feature, and so on. The more mechanical or technologically advanced the product is, the more interested the guy is in knowing all of those things and doing all of those things. And it's not the same a lot of times with, especially with things with like clothing and makeup and stuff like that, unless an article of clothing is intended to create a fake appearance, you know, lift your boobs up to your chin, or because of the shape that the colors create, it makes you look thinner than you really are, things like that. Women don't really get all into how their clothes work. They don't really get all into how sturdy is this type of fabric, how long is this article of clothing going to last. If I get down on my knees in this pair of pants every day and scrub this area of the floor, how fast am I going to get a hole in the knee? You know, they're much less concerned with the utility and the features and the information behind the features on the items that they purchase. And so because of that, like just in the 21st century, and this is partly because of the internet, but just in the 21st century, women are just starting to find out, hey, your makeup actually has stuff in it that's bad for your skin all the time, that might actually be toxic, not just, you know, cause you to get pimples. And they learn terms for this doesn't cause pimples, but they don't necessarily learn that, hey, this thing I'm putting on my face has been known to cause cancer in rats. They don't even look at that stuff. And so you find like there's this whole generation of beyond millennials, they're young kids that are in junior high and high school right now, have YouTube channels on how to make your own makeup because they found out all the crap that's in their makeup is bad for them and they don't want to use it. And it's, so there's some changes that are taking place there, but it's like that tendency is part of the reason why women have ended up in this position of this disposable consumer culture where you don't pay attention not just to what you're buying, but to the quality of what you're buying and the safety of what you're buying. And I think changing that attitude in women would make a big difference in the way that women engage with just shopping in general. And I'm going to point out also a book. Now, I don't have any connection to the author. I actually got this book kind of by accident. I was at the first International Men's Issues Conference in Michigan, and they had a drawing and they gave away books, and I got Bachelor Pad Economics by Aaron Clarey. Bachelor Pad Economics is basically a sort of a set of advice on how to live frugally and how to set yourself up for a financially stable future. And there's advice in it that, you know, a lot of women might look at some of the things that he says in relation to relationships and women and get a little butthurt over it, take it personally and stuff. But you really shouldn't, because it's not misogynistic. It's simply a point of view that you're not used to seeing. And but in any case, there's a lot of good advice in there, and among other things, like the advice of being able to fix your own car, and instead of owning a brand new car, owning older, you know, beater type cars that you just fix them every time they break down, and drive them till they wear out. And when you want to drive something nice, you rent it, and then you don't have to be responsible for it. And what he's basically saying there is, you know, you buy a car, you lose value. And why lose a lot of value when you can just lose a little value and spend a little bit of time? And it's probably under that theory that classic cars develop their value as well, because they are easier to work on than a lot of modern cars, and they weren't as complicated as a lot of modern cars are. So there's some things that have been simplified, but there's some things that are much more complicated. And I think he's got some really good advice there on planning and things. Actually, that book is the thing that really got me thinking about junk degrees and giving advice on, you know, don't saddle yourself with a junk degree when you can study something that will make you money for the rest of your life. In any case, I'm gonna just... Prim, did you have your name in waiting for something to say, or waiting to say something?
Nope, not this time.
Okay. I couldn't tell whether that was new or old. It was really bad.
No, I was trying to delete everything that was old, just so that there wouldn't be any confusion.
Okay. Well, in that case, I'm going to go ahead and start with the super chats, because we have a shitload. So we'll start with the very beginning. This one actually came during the opening monologue. French Honey Badger gave us $20 and said, war on alcohol, war on poverty, war on drugs, war on terrorism. The state has failed all wars on concepts. I'm not really surprised by this, by the way. With the war on climate change, you can be assured that if there is actually a problem, the state will make it worse. And, well, their track record does kind of back up that assertion. I mean, with the war on poverty, we now have a burgeoning welfare state and a dramatically increased percentage of children that are born into single-parent households grow up in poverty and then go on to produce children outside of wedlock and raise them in poverty. The war on drugs has exponentially increased the number of designer drugs on the market and the amount of crime in the United States. And the war on terrorism seems to have spread it all over the world, kind of like when you if you were to try to kill a pile of shit by hitting it with a fly swatter. So
yeah. Well, I mean, and also, like, I feel like eventually the greener energies and things like that, as they become more cost efficient and it eventually like less expensive than the older methods of powering things, I imagine that the free market will just kind of wind up, taking its natural course. People will wind up wanting these cheaper energies, and that will help it out quite a lot, if I had to guess.
Well, I think that...
Well, one thing that I will say is that I forget who assembled the team, but there was a big, huge team of scientists and engineers who were assembled to try and figure out how to free us from petrochemicals in terms of energy, right? So free us from petroleum. And their conclusion was the only thing that would do it was nuclear energy. And none of the greenies want anything to do with that. They won't touch it.
Yeah,
So.
I think that actually the state's habit of interfering in which companies can or cannot profit from providing energy from basically from harvesting, refining, and then distributing all of those resources, energy, water, different sources of heat and so on. I think if the state were not interfering in which of those could be profitable, we would see an increased level of innovation. And if it was really feasible, if it is feasible for us to not be dependent on fossil fuels, it would become easier for someone to find a way to make that happen and make it financially profitable. Something like that is only going to be sustainable if it's profitable. Nobody's going to do that for free. As much as people want to believe it, it's not going to happen.
Well, one of the things that's going on in Ontario right now is there are people who unplug their clock radios when they get up in the morning and plug them back in and reset them when they go to bed at night. They unplug their microwave, anything with the display, their TV, everything. Anything with a little indicator light, a little red dot that shows that it's off, or anything with a digital display, they turn it off because their power, their utility, their electricity bills are higher than their mortgages right now in a lot of places. And
Jesus.
Yeah. And the reason for this is because back, 15, 20 years ago, Ontario was having a real problem with keeping up with demand, right? And they were having rolling brownouts and things like that. And so they essentially put out this massive propaganda campaign to get people to consume less energy. So people did and they did such a good job of consuming less energy that what ended up happening was the profits that, because Ontario Hydro is government owned and government run, the money that was coming in was so much less that they couldn't actually fund any new projects. They couldn't actually afford to build new hydroelectric dams and things like that. So essentially, they figured, okay, we can now live off of this infrastructure that we already have. We don't have brownouts anymore. We're doing fine. But now, of course, they don't have the ability to actually scale up their operations. They don't have the cash on hand, right? Because people were so frugal in their use of energy at the request of Ontario Hydro. So essentially they created their own problem, and now the consumer is really paying a price. And there are people out there who, are paying, $700-800 a month for electricity, and their furnace is off. They don't have an electric heater. They keep their house at 12 degrees Celsius. That's when the furnace will kick on, is when it goes down to 11 degrees Celsius. You can look that up, you Americans. And they unplug everything all the time, and they store leftover food outside in the winter because they just unplug their deep freeze, and so it's like, they absolutely, they cannot afford their power bills, and it's really all because of running a utility as a government, as an arm of the government, rather than running it as what we would call a crown corporation here, which is owned by the government but run like a business, right? They've been running the Ontario electricity grid not as a crown corporation. Even they've been running it as an arm of the government. So it's really, really, really sad. Yikes. What's going on right now.
Basically, micromanaging is expensive, and if it's not expensive in the immediate, it's expensive in the future, because it causes behavioral changes that end up changing the dynamics of the way things are done in such a way as to make them more expensive to do.
Yeah.
You've seen that government gets involved in things here. I think my dad has told the best story of how the government works. There was a guy, I guess, either in his community, or that we have a family friend who has written for various outdoors magazines, different hunting articles and fishing articles and wildlife and all that. Might have been one of his stories, but in any case, there was a farmer who discovered one day when he went out to feed his livestock that there was a deer that was, I think the farmer had sheep, and the deer had decided, or cows, but the deer had decided it was going to eat what they were eating. And it would come into, onto his property, and it would come into the enclosure where his livestock was, because it just hopped over it. And it would go right up to the feeding trough and eat with the other animals. And he couldn't get rid of it. He couldn't chase it away. It would come back. If you have ever been up close to a deer, they can actually, if you don't want to confront one, they can be very intimidating and actually dangerous, because they have very sharp hooves, and they will beat the hell out of you. So, he left the animal alone and just let it do what it was going to do, because there wasn't anything you could do to stop it unless he decided he was going to kill it. And somebody turned him in for having a pet deer. He didn't have a pet deer. He had a deer that was invading his farm and stealing his feed from his livestock. But the EPA showed up, and they were like, well, you have to do something about this deer. You have to get rid of this deer. You can't have a wild animal as a pet. They went off on him big time. And so he kept saying, I don't have a pet deer. This deer is invading my farm and stealing my livestock feed, and I can't do anything about it unless I kill the deer. Oh, we don't want you to kill the deer. Don't kill. We'll catch it. Catch and release, right? Well, they couldn't. They couldn't catch the deer. They spent an entire day trying to contain this animal, chased it all over to rescue it from the situation. They're like, obviously this animal is going to get sick and die from this food. This isn't its natural food. We got to do something, right? And they're chasing this animal all over this farm for the whole day. I don't know why they didn't just dart it, but they didn't. In any case, when they finally caught it, they finally rounded it up, they finally got it in a truck, they're finally going to take it someplace where they can release it and it'll be safe and it'll live its life and everything, and it had a heart attack and died.
Oh my gosh, I can just imagine the yakking sax playing in the background of that whole
all of this, all of this interference, all of this chasing, all of this, you know, they rescued it to death.
Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
Scooby-Doo, Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
Right?
And like, this is your government in action. This happened to a real animal.
Oh man, does anybody remember the spotted owl incident? The guy who found a spotted owl.
Oh God.
On his property, and the government actually they made a Simpsons episode out of it. The Simpsons episode was the screaming caterpillar episode, right? Yeah. There was a screaming caterpillar that like literally just screams constantly, keeps everybody awake, and it's in Homer's yard, and the authorities got wind of the fact that this endangered species has decided to set up house in the Simpsons' yard, and now it's the Simpsons' responsibility to ensure that its habitat is not disturbed, that it can survive all of this, right? So this guy with this spotted owl on his property, the EPA finds out about it and then goes and says, okay, well, here's the thing, dude. Now you have to actually allocate X% of your farm to a habitat for this spotted owl, okay, and you're not allowed to use it for anything, and if this owl dies, we're gonna hold you responsible.
Oh my God!
The owl must now be immortal.
Fine you hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? And it's like, you know, if I woke up tomorrow and I saw a spotted owl in my yard, I'd shoot it.
No kidding.
Bury it before anybody noticed.
Yeah, they've done the same thing to people over their land is there for decades and decades, and it's dry for decades and decades, and then there's a particularly wet year or there is an abnormal weather event, and for 3 weeks there's a small area of their property that is flooded as a result of the abnormal weather event, and all of a sudden that's a wetland, and if they don't take measures to ensure that it remains flooded forever, they are engaging in pollution or altering the environment by not altering the environment. And there's been instances like Reader's Digest years ago did an article on this, because the EPA was doing this to farmers that had areas. There was a particularly wet year and there were some abnormal weather events, and there were farmers with land that was historically dry land that had, you know, a puddle for 3 weeks, and all of a sudden that's declared a wetland, and they're not allowed to farm there, and they have to do all this stuff to it to make sure that the water stays. It was just absolutely insane. And this is all that micromanagement. This is one of the reasons why when we talked about the changes to the chemical makeup of products that should be done, why my suggestion isn't for the government to come in and say, but you have to do it this way now. Because with this, the micromanagement that the government does, a lot of times they end up completely failing. You can't sell vinegar, which kills, it does a better job of killing bacteria and viruses than bleach. You cannot sell vinegar as a cleaning product because it hasn't been researched by the government. It is a cleaning product. It's a better cleaning product than bleach. Less people are sensitive to it. Less people are likely to, like if you get it on your skin, it's not going to do the kind of damage that bleach does. If you get it in your clothes and wash it out, it's not necessarily going to do the damage that bleach does. But, you know, it's not government researched, so it can't be what it is. So, I mean, just, that's my take on government regulation.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
The entire thing is ridiculous. You know, like the fact that, And then on top of that, we have cleaning products and particularly surface products like Teflon that have never really been, they were on the market for 40 years before they were ever tested for their effects on humans, right? Like, you know, and when you look at something like Fantastic or Formula 409 or, you know, these other products with these heavy surfactants that remove soap scum and things like that. Dog, I will kill you. When you have these products and you're cleaning your baby's bathtub with them and then bathing your baby in the bathtub that you cleaned with them, and you have, like, a lot of these chemicals haven't been subjected to any kind of testing on their effects on humans other than does it cause a skin irritation. That's the only thing that they'll test for. Because anything else requires long-term testing over years to see whether it might cause cancer or, you know, cause other health problems, whatever. And so we're constantly being exposed to, I will kill you. And, you know, and here I am, I'm really going to kill this dog. Yeah, no, she's literally, she's not even in her panties of shame. And yet she is whining. She's whining because I'm talking.
She needs an oil can.
But,
yeah.
Yeah. But you have an issue with you know, like, with all of these things that don't really get tested because they're not food or drugs, right? So they don't quite get tested to the degree, because they're not meant for human consumption, but they're still possibly absorbed by the skin, right? And so phthalates aren't meant for human consumption, so they never were subjected to any FDA kind of testing, right? But when you put lotion on your skin in 10 minutes, it's like it's gone. Well, where did it go? It went into you.
Yes, and you must
through
do
your
that.
Skin.
You must do that, or else it gets the hose again.
Oh my God. I'm ready to kill this dog. I swear to God, she's been wandering around the house and howling. She's in heat again.
Aww.
Right? And I'm
Poor
just
puppy.
praying that she doesn't have another hysterical pregnancy, because if she does, we won't be able to fix her again. Right?
Oh no.
Because last time after her heat, she had a hysterical pregnancy and then we couldn't fix her. The vet was like, no, we got to wait till her hormones and her body's back to normal before we do this. Right? And so it didn't get done, and then she went into heat again, and now it's like she wanders around the house howling, just howling for no reason.
Birth control for dogs.
Looking at you and howling. It's like she's been on a 7-day crying jag.
Your dog's
right?
a feminist, mate.
Oh my God, my dog's a feminist who's got PMDD, right?
Oh, jeez.
So, oh my God, it's like I'm ready to just fucking murder her.
And that brings us to
seriously
Xeranx's super chat, because it's relevant. Xeranx gave us $2 and said, relevant song, girls ain't nothing but trouble.
Oh my God, so much fucking trouble. I don't understand why I didn't choose a boy dog this time. Why didn't I choose a boy dog? I've always had girl dogs and they were always nothing but hassle.
Yeah.
Goddamn bitches.
Bitches be
I know,
crazy.
I know. Actually,
Yeah.
she's being such a bitch right now. I'm thinking of renaming her Warski.
Oh. We Great. Now there's poop. French Honey Badger gave us $2
my
and said,
son suggested it.
I know. French Honey Badger gave us $2 and said, you cited so many tragedy of the commons problems. And then Joey Jojo gave us $2 and said, estrogen in the water is good. I hate being male. I can imagine in today's environment that that's probably very similar to me once a month going, I hate being female. And now that's changing, I hate being female even more. But
you should
aren't you loving the
water.
hot flashes?
Oh Jesus!
Aren't you loving the hot flashes?
No,
Hannah?
no.
The hot flashes are glorious. They're wonderful.
No,
they're everything I dreamed they would be.
No.
Hey,
But
Joey,
I'm just gonna go there. The hormones in the water are not gonna give you a sex change. So as as
You
much
need to
as
take a page out of Tom Golden's book.
Yeah.
Men are good. Remember that.
as much as I sympathize, there are things about both genders that each gender hates being. We're stuck with it, and it's not all bad and it's not all good. It's just all there, except for those of us that are not all there. And while we're at it, Joey, I recommend checking out Tom Golden's site and looking at his work, because I think that's something that might help you with a lot of the dealing with the modern shit.
That was a serious recommendation.
Yeah,
that was a serious recommendation. I love him.
Actually, he's helped me deal with a lot of negativity, and I'm not even a guy. So yeah, it's definite. Tom Golden, Men Are Good is the blog, and he also
the YouTube channel.
He's also got a YouTube channel. He also is a published author. Swallowing the Snake, I believe, is the name of his title on The Way Men Heal, or his book on The Way Men Heal, and that is definitely recommended reading. He's got some other titles as well that off the top of my head I can't think of them, and this for everybody, that's definitely recommended reading, especially if you have something going on that you need to deal with, that you're grieving over somebody, you've had a breakup, your job isn't going the way you want, you discovered that you got a junk degree, anything that's going on, or you're just looking at all of the issues that are going on in the world today, and it's like overwhelming. A great place to visit is Tom Golden's site and his work. I can't praise it enough.
And I also would recommend, if you have any female friends who are pregnant and know that they're having a boy, to gift them with a copy of his book. I think it's called Helping Women Relate to Their Sons, or something like that. Which I think gives women, women weren't boys, they were girls. They might not quite get how to relate to their boys, or be able to really get into the heads of their boys and understand where their boys are coming from and why their boys are the way they are. And this book is specifically designed for mothers.
It's called Helping Mothers Be Closer to Their Sons, Understanding the Unique World of Boys. And
there you go.
It's definitely a good one too.
Yeah.
So with that, I'm going to go on to the next one. Let's see. I just read Joey's. So we have Kind Torment gave us $5 and said, "So I can blame estrogen for my love of ponies." Yeah.
maybe.
I don't know. Honestly, I think horses in general, love of horses is kind of a manly thing. I know a lot of women like horses, and there's the whole girls loving ponies thing and everything, but loving horses is a manly thing. So loving a cartoon about ponies isn't really too far off from that, is it?
Okay, but no, but I don't think that's really the case. I think men don't love horses. They love a horse.
Yeah, and they love, well, men in general, I've noticed, have an affinity for animals that is different from women, and I don't think women understand it. They relate to each other in a different way.
I was listening to 6:30 Chad in Edmonton here, the Ryan Jesperson show. And I know Nick Redding really hates Ryan Jesperson, but he's actually pretty good in terms of sort of a little bit of conservative-ish talk radio. But he played Jimmy Stewart's appearance on Late Night with what's his name, the original host.
Okay.
The Late Show with the original host and the guy who did the sweepstakes stuff.
Yeah,
Ed McMahon and
you're thinking of Johnny Carson.
Johnny Carson.
Yeah, there was a host before Johnny Carson, but go on.
Okay. So anyhow, so Jimmy Stewart comes on, and I guess his dog had just died. Oh. And he wrote a poem, and he read it out, and he was in tears at the end of it, back in 1981 or something like that, and it was called "My Dog," a dog named Bo. I believe is what it was called, or My Dog Bo. And it was just so unbelievably, like, I'm sitting in the car waiting for somebody, right, to come out of a building, and I'm sitting there listening to this, and I'm just like sobbing, right, as he, you know, talks about what a pain in the ass this dog is. He's talking about his dog exactly the way I talk about my dogs, right? His dog is such a pain in the ass and all of this, right? And then by the end of it, he's just trying to keep it together so he can finish reading his poem, right? And then they went right to commercial because the host of the radio show who played it
was crying,
right? And I'm just like, you know, because it's just like men, they do have this tender place inside them for, you know, even my boyfriend, who really didn't want this new dog, who didn't want the old dog, didn't want the new dog, but he's nice to her, and he cuddles with her and stuff, and he's good to her and all of that. And I think he really genuinely likes her. He just never wants to quite give away the game.
I don't even like you.
He just yelled from the bedroom. Did you hear that? I don't even like you.
Shots fired.
He's my sweetie. He's my softie. I don't even like you, bitch.
Yeah.
But yeah. But it's just men do have. No, don't put her in there. We can let her wander around and howl.
Okay.
It's fine. Okay, fine. Oh my god.
Yeah. It's something I noticed growing up with, you know, boys and their dogs, and occasionally boys and their cats, but most of the boys I knew had dogs. Some of them were hunting dogs. My grandpa had hunting dogs, and there was a rapport between man and pet that, like, I was always close to my pets. I had cats, and I had rats, and I had a hamster. Obviously, there's more you can deal with as far as reading the animal for closeness with a cat than with a hamster. But I don't think I connected with the animals on the same level as much as, like, you see a guy with his dog. You know, women are more likely, most of the time, women are more likely to confine the animal. Women are more likely, I've seen, you know, women being more likely to, you know, regard the animal as, like, this is my fur baby, as opposed to, this is my companion. And dogs will sit there, the guys will sit there, and the dog is their buddy. They don't necessarily confine the animal the way that I see a lot of gals do. And it's like they can sit in the room, and even though the dog doesn't speak any human language, or the cat doesn't speak any human language, there's a rapport that it's like they'll have an entire conversation with no language whatsoever other than their own camaraderie, and they read each other's signals, and they interact that way, and it's a totally different thing. But in any case, I don't know how we got on this, but I guess it was the love of ponies thing, which has nothing to do with this because it's about the cartoon.
Yeah.
And you know, the enjoyment of things that are like lighthearted and fun, that's kind of universal. It's not really a guy thing or a gal thing. But that's one of the things that I noticed growing up, is that, you know, and I've seen, like, everybody, when they lose an animal companion, they are sad. But it seems like a deeper and more gut-wrenching thing for people who respond to their animals that way. And most of the time when I see that, it's a guy that just is like, they'll grieve the way you would grieve for your human friend, that, you know, you've told each other your secrets and everything. And it is. I could see that. I mean, I've never heard that poem, but now I'm afraid to look it up because I know it'll send me on a crying jag, and I don't need one right now.
Oh, you should be. You should be afraid. Be very afraid, Hannah. Dog, you better not be in that kitchen.
So going on, we have French Honey Badger gave us $2 and said, "Y'all mother lurkers need Murray and Rothbard." Did I skip one?
You missed two,
Oh,
actually.
missed two of them. I jumped down an entire screen. Feel the Bears gave us $5 and said, New York lawyers don't remember that socialism always ends in starvation and genocide. In response to our shilling. French Honey Badger gave us $5 and said, you have the right to enjoy other people's properties, and you have the right to demand other people's work for free so you can enjoy it. Yeah,
of course.
That seems to be the case anymore.
Yeah.
But only if you're in the right place on the progressive stack.
No, of course.
The one that has 2X chromosomes.
Yeah, we can't have men, getting on to women's land. That would be sexism and shit.
French Honey Badger also gave us $5 and said it's too little capitalism, which is responsible, not too much. And that he was referring to the fast fashion industry and the makeup industry and all of that. We went through that, and then we went through the fact that feminists blame consumerism on environmental issues and then never look into who the consumers are. So and I have to agree, and I can explain that one as well. In a system where the dog agrees with me, where the greatest value comes from, I'm gonna buy this and it's gonna be good and it's gonna last, and so on. We've got the feminist opposition in the background
for days.
It sounds so pitiful. It just rips your heart out.
Aww.
But
she's wagging her tail, though.
I know.
People are talking, and she's wagging her tail, and
oh, poor baby.
In any case, it would create a better system wherein we would be looking at better quality stuff. People would be more careful what they spent their money on.
Yeah.
So, Hokibukisa gave us $5 and said, if capitalism had a peen, what would Venezuelan women be doing right about now? They'd be
still starving?
Not eating their dogs.
They'd be
eating their dogs.
They'd be writing articles about the nutritional content of semen.
Oh, yeah, no, almost no nutritional content at all. Very low protein, very high carb. Oh my god, dog.
It's mostly sugars. But
yeah.
then there's that old urban legend about the chick in biology class that hears that sitting in the back of the classroom, raises her hand and goes, "But why is it so salty then?" And that girl has a date for every weekend for the entire rest of the school year.
There you go.
Let's see. We have Eldritch gave us £5. Okay. Sorry. I'm looking at that and all of a sudden everything just went out of focus. It's because I moved my head. For those that don't understand, this is my first show with bifocals on. I'm old now.
Oh, okay.
So Eldritch gave us, I'm turning my head again. Eldritch gave us £5 and says, as a transsexual and transition, I see men's rights as trans rights. And you're correct, Eldritch. Treatment for trans folks starts with treatment for men and women to work things out. That is a good point as well. One of the things that really pisses me off about the feminist approach to trans rights and to the environment in which people transition, the environment in which people choose whether or not to transition and basically define themselves, is they see it as something to exploit, and therefore if you don't toe their line, you're the bad guy, you're persona non gratis, you're suddenly regardless of which sex you started out as and which gender you identify as, you've got toxic masculinity one way or another.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like female to male transgender people, they're often treated as betraying the female sex because they're transitioning to male, and it's a real shame. And even then, the male to female transgender people, they're treated like, oh, you're just trying to be sneaky to get into the women's restrooms and stuff. And it's it's always something wrong about the male aspect.
If a guy really wanted to sneak into the women's restrooms, all he has to do is get a job as a janitor. But with the argument of TERFs is that female to male transsexuals are
trying to appropriate male privilege for themselves, and they're betraying their oppressed sisters by doing so. They're turncoats. And then the argument for against male to female ones is that, yes, they're trying to infiltrate women's spaces and also attempting to appropriate women's oppression so that they can harness it for themselves, right? And that they can't understand what it's like to be a woman because they didn't grow up. They grew up with male privilege. They did not grow up as oppressed as girls, and therefore, you know, they can't really relate to women-born women, and which is a stupid term because nobody's born a woman. You're born a girl, but whatever.
I was born a baby.
I don't even know what the hell I was, but whatever it was weird.
My basic point is they're so caught up, like the rad fem argument is a totally different thing, but like the mainstream feminist movement is so caught up in what they can use you for that, and not willing to actually listen and not willing to actually advocate for, you know, the perspectives that they are offered by different people who are trans.
Yeah, and they want not just trans people, but migrants, immigrants, you know, illegal aliens, or undocumented persons. They want people of color. They want every single vulnerable group to essentially hold up in front of them as a shield to say, you know, if you disapprove of what we're doing on behalf of women and, you know, man-spreading or sexist air conditioning or whatever, right, you're actually harming all of these other groups of people that we're using as human shields. And that's really, I mean, that was the whole Gamergate, not your shield thing.
Right. Well, what I was going to say was, the first men's rights issue that I see touching on trans rights is you have the right to be yourself, even if yourself doesn't serve a movement. And it's something that you have to watch out for with every ideological group. It's not that the entire movement. It's not that the entire movement exists to serve any one person's interests or anything. But it's not your job to serve the movement with your status as an outlier or a victim or a person with experiences that need dealt with. It's the movement. The reason the movement exists is because of the issues and the people's needs related to those issues. So in that way, it's the movement's job to serve you. And being part of a movement that, like, this movement does that. Being part of this movement, you know, it does entail activism as part of the movement, so there is that way in which you serve the movement, but it doesn't entail the movement turning around and telling you, you must experience victimhood this way in order to be part of this movement. And feminism does. Feminism says exactly that. And I think that it is, as toxic as that is to women, and as toxic as that is to men, if you take women who are trans women and men who are trans men, that is another degree of toxicity from feminism that hits.
Well, one of the things that I do want to make clear too, because, you know, like a lot of conservatives, like really, really hardcore conservatives, make the same bathroom argument, right? That TERFs do, right? That all men, all people with penises, you know, are a risk to women and girls, or that women and girls deserve privacy from the eyes of, you know, the evil male gaze and things like that, right? But I have seen conservatives simply make the argument that given what the trans positive feminists are arguing should be the case, which is, okay, you look like a man, you have a full beard, right? Your one concession to your trans woman status is that you wear a pink hoodie, like that Varmint Coyote guy on YouTube years ago, right? Yeah, but you identify as a woman, and therefore you can go into the women's washrooms, right? And if that's if the only thing that needs to happen for you to be able to get access to a woman's changing room or a women's restroom or whatever is for you to say, I identify as a woman, right? Then you're going to, then that's, it's just like, if all you have to do is say, this man raped me and the accusation is the conviction, right? Then it opens the entire situation up to people who would be wanting to abuse it, right? And we can make that argument in terms of Me Too and the sort of the social destruction of men through social media trials that where social media acts as judge, jury, and executioner, and the accusation is the conviction. We can also at least acknowledge the argument that if all you need to do, right, is say, I identify as a woman, now I have access to this restroom, then you're going to actually have people men who are predators, right, going into women's bathrooms. That's just something that's going to happen. And I think that that's a lot of the conservative argument there, or at least a lot of the argument from conservatives focuses on that, not on genuine trans women, not on people like Blair White and Theron Meyer, right, but on the argument coming from trans positive feminists and the sort of the gender is fluid kind of feminists, and and the people who orchestrated Bill C-16 in Canada, right? That you can switch your gender on a daily basis, and and anything goes and whatever. Okay, well, if that's the case, then you're going to find some absolute freaks taking advantage of that and using it to gain access to women that they otherwise would not have had access to. And so, I mean, like, it's a complicated issue, and I think it's needlessly being polarized.
Yeah,
I think that TERFs are actually much more discriminatory, much more prejudiced in this way, because I don't see a whole lot of conservatives arguing that the only reason to be a trans woman is so that you can gain access to the ladies' bathroom. Right. I don't see conservatives arguing that. I see conservatives arguing that these people are confused, whatever, but not necessarily that they're dangerous, just that the opening up of the self-definition area, right? That you don't even have to put in an effort to look female to get access to that bathroom. You don't have to live as a woman to gain access to that bathroom. You just have to say, today I'm a woman, and there you go. Doors open, right? So I see that being the conservative, more broadly, the conservative argument. And the TERFs are essentially saying the only reason you would even be a male to female trans woman is to victimize, to gain access to women's private spaces, to victimize them.
In short, the TERF argument is that men are predators in general, and this is a manifestation of that, whereas the conservative argument is that this allows the minority among men that is predators to have an exploitable condition that they don't think they should have.
Yes.
I will say this. If you want to watch a TERF have an absolute meltdown, just an absolute meltdown on someplace like Twitter or Facebook or something like that, compare trans women in the women's room to cis women using the men's room because there's a line. And you'll see every ounce of the entitlement come out. You'll see them go apeshit trying to deny accusations you haven't made. They just break down. They lose their shit. It's hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious. If you wanna troll a TERF, you wait until they're starting to say this crap about trans women just are only trans women so they can get into the women's room, and then you start razzing them about women using the men's room because there's a line, and you'll just it's a blast. But I'm gonna get on to the next. And yes, I am pushing trolling TERFs on the internet over trans women because TERFs are assholes. They're asking for it. They deserve it.
Couldn't happen to nicer people.
Yeah, at least it shouldn't. But the next one we have is Cyber Berserk gave us our daily sex. Did I miss another one? Oh.
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, it's French Honey Badger.
Oh, French Honey Badger. gave us $5 and said there's no slave labor, they're willingly working. The fact that they are paid less is because they are less productive. It's not exploitation. It depends on where we're talking about. There are some situations where there are people, there's still slave labor in the world today. There are people that are stuck in situations where they're not working willingly. And it's been discovered in third world countries, and there are products like we're talking about. Last show we mentioned blood diamonds and things like that. There's still forced labor over things that are highly wanted goods. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that all labor that gets low pay is necessarily forced labor. But yeah, there is slave labor. I will say that. Just getting low pay doesn't necessarily mean you're a slave, especially if you agreed to do the job. But if you're not able to bargain for better pay, if the conditions that you're working under are such that you haven't got any power at all to say no, you're a slave.
It's like the Indian and Pakistani men who were lured to Dubai to build skyscrapers in their bare feet with no helmets.
Yeah.
And the moment that they arrived, their passports were seized.
That's slave labor.
It's not fair to call that working for pay, because really,
that's a different story. But in any case, I do agree that like the term sweatshop gets overused, but those exist as well. But I do agree that just getting low pay doesn't make you a slave.
No.
I've done jobs for low pay because I was desperate for work at different times, and I would have been upset if I didn't have those jobs because I needed the money, even though it wasn't a lot of money. And I wouldn't have considered myself a slave at that point. I simply considered myself unable to find better work. That's a different story as well.
I also think that a high minimum wage makes it really, really difficult. It makes it even more difficult for young people with no job experience to get into the job market.
Yeah, when you try to make the minimum wage, when you try to make the minimum wage a living wage, you screw everybody. Every time, and I've worked for minimum wage, every time the minimum wage goes up, employers that pay minimum wage reduce hours for their workers. And the reason that is because they have a budget for their workforce, and if you take more per hour per employee out of that budget, they have less hours they can pay for. That's just the way it is. It's not they're not doing it because they're mean, they're not doing it because they're greedy. It's not rocket science. They know how much they sell, they know how much they take in, and they know how much they can pay out. And it's the whole minimum wage controversy is really stupid. And I would rather be in a situation where we went back to guilds, not unions, but guilds, and were able to bargain for pay and make our own deals individually with employers for pay and things like that, and not have to deal with the federal government intervening. The other end of it is with minimum wage. Well, that's all you got to pay is minimum wage. So I have worked in healthcare repeatedly, not consistently for years, but repeatedly for years. And I am currently working in the direct care for intellectual disabilities industry. At the state level, state facilities don't pay very well. It's the same thing as with nursing homes. In comparison to privately run facilities and stuff like that, the pay is going to be lower because the state only has to pay minimum wage for anything. Now, the job I do now gets a higher pay because there are qualifications for it, and there's a small amount of education. Like in comparison to, say, a college degree, it's a very small amount of education. But there is education, there's certification required for it. But my employer pays me more than I was ever paid when I worked in nursing homes. And I'm not just saying dollar amount, but as far as in comparison to what the minimum wage is today versus in comparison to what the minimum wage was back then. When I worked as a nurse's aide, I made minimum wage. And that was it, because that's all they had to pay. That job was almost as involved as this job. And so I see it as it's a double-edged sword, and both sides do damage, as opposed to both sides being helpful. And I don't support there being a minimum wage that the government dictates and says this is what you got to pay, and I don't support there being government intervention between or government involvement with workers groups like unions. That should be something that is independent, and the groups and the employers should be able to deal with each other without the government getting involved. It's an overreach basically of government power, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Now, I know there's a lot of people in the men's rights movement that differ from me in opinion on that, and that's actually a good thing. We should all be involved, and all of those points of view should be part of the movement, because it's important for a movement like ours to look at all angles. That's my angle. But there should be input from people who are pro-union. There should be input from people who are anti-union. There should be input from people who are business owners and so on. It's the kind of thing that we need to help to develop our outlooks on dealing with issues related to men in the workplace.
There you go.
But so now we get to go on to the sex.
That's what we all want.
And then the oral sex. No. Cyberzerk gave us 50 sex. Actually, technically this is oral sex because I am speaking it. And says, all you honey badgers want is sex and honey. No, you pegged me. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, just don't combine the honey with the sex, because you get too much sugar in there, you're gonna get yeast infection. So.
Yeah, that's never any good.
Yeah, no, that's no.
Did I gross everyone out?
No, no, just.
We've heard worse.
All the men in the audience, I'm sure. The women all know this by now.
Yeah, well, if you don't do it. It's also
food sex makes yeast infections. Just saying.
Don't even bring food into the bed. It's easy to get out of the sheets, but it's not so easy to get out of the mattress. And you don't want to discover mold on your mattress.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty gross, yeah.
Darren Hightower III gave us $2 and didn't say anything. Oh.
Well,
oh, that was all close together. See, I'm confused now because there's no space in between the lines there, and I'm like, wait, that's the next person's name. That's okay. It's
we're getting the silent treatment from our fans. That's good.
You don't love us anymore.
Hey, they paid us $2 to be silent at us. I'm okay with that.
Yep. Thank you, Darren. The Autistic Goldfish gave us $5 and said, how many calories do feminists lose jumping to conclusions? None, because they can't even.
Oh, my goodness. That would explain why they're all so fat.
Yes. No. They're just not beach body ready.
I'm just being mean. I'm being a mean girl right now.
You're being facetious?
I'm being a girl right now.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
And Rambam 3000 gave us £5 and says, glad to be here live for once. And
glad to have had you here.
And then we have Unanimous Delivers gave us $2 and didn't post anything, and then gave us $5 and then didn't post anything. And I have a suspicion that Unanimous Delivers actually had something to say, and the system didn't let it go through, and that's why the $5 was right after the $2. So,
oh dear.
Yeah. Are you still there, Unanimous Delivers? Because that probably came through a while ago.
Yeah, it was quite a while ago.
Yeah, all our super chats came through at like the beginning of the show, and we were going through the topic, and I didn't read them until we were done with the topic. But if Unanimous Delivers is still there, go ahead and
he said I am. I don't know how to chat.
I don't know how to chat. Oh, okay. Well, that's how you chat right there. I don't know how
Thanks for trying anyway.
I've never actually done the super chat function, so I don't know how to put the text in, but it's all right. Like, we are happy to have the super chats, and thank you very much for that.
I've never actually done the super chat function on a stream.
I did.
Somebody who's collecting them.
Yeah,
I did it once, and made a joke about being meta. You might remember that.
Yes.
Yeah.
It has been done once on my channel, but that was when I was streaming for something for honey badgers, and I ended up having to give all of the super chats to a Brian fundraiser or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah.
Yep.
So I wasn't collecting for me.
Okie dokie. Well, in any case, yeah, there we go. There's technologically inept women here. We haven't investigated it yet, so we don't automatically know how to do it. But with that said, I think we have completely covered the topics, and we've completely covered the super chats and the topics brought up by the super chats. And so, I just want to remind everybody once again, go ahead and on the live streams channel in particular, hit the like button, because that does affect where we are shown by YouTube. They like to hide us if we don't have enough likes, and they like to show only the channels that have the most likes and everything. And I say specifically the live streams channel because that is the one that is going to continue to be publicly available after we're done. Whereas the one on the Honey Badger Radio channel, if you'll notice, you can't go back and find the old streams on that channel. They're on the live streams channel. That's also why I ask for people to go to the live streams channel for the chat, because that chat will show on the, I guess, the side of the, like, when it replays, it'll replay that chat as well now. So, that's where the cool kids are. That's the Honey Badger live streams channel, not the Honey Badger Radio channel. And to all you cool kids listening tonight, to my co-hosts, to everyone who helps make the Honey Badger live streams happen, thank you all very much, and good night.